Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this, the first of the autumn sessions of the MTA's calendar. I'm delighted to welcome you to this session. My name is Jill Davis, and I'm the brand new Conference and Events Manager here at the MTA. So thank you very much for joining us. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Dan and Patrick from RSL Awards, who are going to be leading today's session. So first of all, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're in Zoom focus mode, so we can see you and you can just see us as the hosts. We're going to have a short presentation delivered by Dan and Patrick, and then after that we'd invite you all to unmute yourselves and ask any questions. So if you could stay on mute just throughout the presentation so that we minimise background noise, that would be great. There'll be plenty of time for questions at the end of the session. You can also drop questions into the chat. And without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Patrick and Dan to lead the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Very lovely to be here this afternoon. My name's Dan Francis. I'm the Head of Sales and Partnerships for the UK and Ireland. And I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully you can all see that. What we're aiming to do today really is highlight the value of vocational qualifications as a route alongside GCSE and A-level. Possibly in some contexts as an alternative to GCSE and A-level, but primarily the way it sits with GCSE and A-level in generating high value pathways for aspirational students. There's a certain amount of explanation as to how the qualification has been built in the first place and the core principles behind it, and then also looking at sort of the curriculum in terms of the intent, implementation and impact, those lovely Ofsted words, to kind of highlight how really the rules do apply to all students across the age, well, across the ability range, and then just to flag the way that RSL VQs operate as a complementary and a complementary qualification alongside GCSE and A-level. So I'll hand over to Patrick in a minute or two, but I just wanted to contextualise the education space and to flag up where our qualifications sit. So you can see here the regulated qualifications framework ranging from E1 all the way through to level 8 and how that sits within the institution and then educational phase. On the right hand side, just a side note around our graded exams, that you can see that running from Premier to grade 8, our qualifications for instruments sit at the same level as those for Trinity and ABRSM, with grades 6 to 8 carrying UCAS points, and then of course grades 4 to 5 being benchmarked to sit at RQF level 2 or the upper end of GCSE, and of course grade 3 sitting there at the lower end of GCSE. Just to note on that, there are exam boards out there that will recognise that you can perform a grade 2 or a grade 3 piece to a very high standard, and actually certainly within the context of OCR as an example, you can perform a grade 3 piece, and actually they are difficult enough to access the highest levels for difficulty, so that the 6 marks. So it's worth just thinking about that within the context of what we're talking about this afternoon. You can see in the middle the VQ, where it says VQ current. Our qualifications range from level 1 up to level 6. Obviously the ones we're talking about today are primarily the level 2 and the level 3 qualifications, which are benchmarked to sit at those appropriate levels for GCSE and A-level. How do we know this? Well, in the technical guidance for the approval process for the VQs for 2024, this is a process that RSL have been through, and Patrick has been part of that process. There is very clear guidance set out, which highlights that the VQs, the engagement should not take precedence over the rigour and depth expected at the relevant level. So in this case, level 2 and level 3. Quite often, and there's huge conversations around, we need to make sure that qualifications are engaging, that students can access it, and sometimes there can be this temptation to think that engaging means making it a little bit more straightforward, or not worrying about certain areas that are just going to be too difficult or inaccessible for students. Well, actually, the VQs don't shy away from the fact that there's rigour and depth, but they are also highly engaging, and they've been very carefully written to make sure that all of those things are covered. You can see as well the other highlighted section, they need to complement and supplement the academic curriculum. They must provide a comparable level of rigour and challenge to GCSEs. So this means that whether you are a student that has never picked up an instrument in their life, or whether you have gone through your grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on your clarinet playing, through the classical grades, or whether you have become a very skilled producer or DJ, or you just really, really enjoy making music in your own time. All of those students can be catered for with the VQ, subject to your curriculum being appropriately kind of written before you get to that point, which is obviously all to do with the intent and the implementation to ensure that the progression is written in. Just to highlight a few other points as well. The Department for Education requires that technical awards, that's the vocational qualifications, only include content that is directly related to the qualification's specific purposes. The specific purposes are essentially the fact that it's a music qualification or it's a creative and performing arts qualification, and it is dealing with the skills and content that is relevant to that. So there's not lots of other kind of irrelevant noise around it as the students are studying. Technical awards are about acquiring associated practical and technical skills. So it's not just about sort of learning lots of facts and figures and knowledge and understanding. And there's a breadth and depth of study that prepares students for study post-16 and have content of sufficient depth to represent credible development relevant to the identified sector or occupational group. Obviously, in this context, we're talking about creative industries and the various different avenues that are there. So as we're writing these qualifications, that we're looking at where they sit on the regulated qualifications framework to make sure that the learning that they've done beforehand it matches that, and of course that it has sufficient breadth and depth and progression to enable them to access courses at post-16, and that's all courses at post-16. And the really important bit there as well at the bottom, incorporate a significant core of knowledge and theoretical content with broad-ranging applicability comparable to the challenge and rigour offered by GCSEs. So I think these are important things to bear in mind as we then look at the general picture within a school context, which we'll try to map here as clearly as possible, because this is sort of, we bear this in mind as we're looking at the core principles and the philosophy behind what we try to do. There's our level 2 VQ and our level 3 VQ sitting there within the classroom, with progression having come through key stage 2 and 3, whole class curriculum learning. There's an element of whole class instrumental tuition in there. There's small group learning. There's listening exercises. There's composition exercises. Basically a creative process that then moves through to give access to VQs and GCSEs, which have similar benchmark levels of skills and understanding required, but there's obviously differences in the content and the way that they are assessed. And that obviously moves through to level 3 with A-level and VQ. And I think the very important thing to note, and we get a lot of these conversations and a lot of comments on social media, and when we're talking to heads of department, key stage 4 courses, that's GCSE and VQs, must enable access through the curriculum without the prerequisite of external prior learning. GCSEs and VQs have all been written with a very, very clear directive from the Department for Education that there is no requirement for a student to have passed an instrumental grade or to be able to play at a particular instrumental level to be able to succeed. All the learning should be achievable through curriculum lessons, through curriculum learning, and it's about being a musician. And some are instrumentalists who might be performing at a very high level, and others might be quote unquote non-instrumentalists, but actually they've had sufficient access, and then from the start of year 10 through to the end of year 11 they have sufficient time to continue to develop their musical skills, including their instrumental skills, whatever that instrument might be, in order to enjoy success and to be able to pass and access the VQ and GCSE courses. Obviously that then transfers all the way through to key stage 5 as well. While GCSE, all the boards have 4 very clear areas of study which they need to cover. One of this is the subject technical content. One of those obviously must cover performance, one must cover composition, one must cover listening, and of course there's a focus on Western classical and also non-Western classical. The VQ is slightly more flexible in that regard, but it really sort of, what underpins it is about a knowledge about music, a knowledge of music, and then an application of those skills. And those skills need to be appropriate to the discipline, the industry, and the style and the genre, and that covers all styles and all genres. If you think about that from a curriculum planning point of view, what we're really talking about is at Key Stage 2, 3, 4 and 5, students are engaged in a number of things which can probably be summarised as composing, performing, listening and critical engagement. That sort of is roughly equivalent to the national curriculum. Track that through to Key Stage 4, and what you find is the sweet spot of musical learning is the middle of that Venn diagram there, where all of those 4 things are going on at the same time. Even though one of the focuses or one of the things that you're assessing might have a particular focus in one direction. And I think it's important really to consider that when we're looking at VQs, it's an assessment of the process and the development that happens rather than necessarily the end result. And I think also it's important to put the learning in front of the assessment and let the learning lead the assessment rather than the other way around. And certainly if you were to have a more in-depth conversation with Patrick about all the assessment practices and the paperwork and so on and so forth, you should find that kind of runs through all of the VQs. So whilst the benchmark learning is of the same standard as Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5, you find the approaches that you can take are significantly more fluent. I just want to take a moment as well, before I hand over to Patrick, to flag up the aspect of application of skills appropriate to the style or the genre. And this is where I'm going to a little bit of a soapbox moment about notation. Notation is writ large in lots of discussions, and should students be able to read music? Should students not be able to read music? Does it matter? Actually, what we're talking about here in many ways is about staff notation, which was designed for a very specific purpose. And it is one form of coding that students will want to be able to access as part of their learning. And that access can come all the way through from the first moment they pick up an instrument all the way through to when they come out sort of the other side and continue learning as an adult. However, that's one form of notation. You can see there's one example there where you've got the formal notation and the chord chart over the top. But the question is, some students are accessing music differently, so that aren't coming through a particular Western classical route or a particularly traditional Western classical instrument. Guitarists, for example, you've got tab there. When I first started teaching, one of the things I needed to do as a trumpet player and a piano player was to make sure that I could read tab so I could then communicate and work with guitarists and help them with the sort of notation they'd need to do for their compositions and for when they were working on performance. These are all taken from our RSL graded books, by the way. And then, of course, this is taken from the improvisation section of our RSL graded exams. And there you just got a lead sheet and the chord chart. And that, again, is a perfectly acceptable form of notation to submit for GCSE to represent the students' intentions. And obviously, as they're going through their course, being able to just give notation, little guides to themselves about what they're trying to do as an ed memoir, which is what staff notation is, I think is really quite important. But we've also got these areas as well. Now, these are taken from music production books. You've got students that are accessing music outside the classroom, inside the classroom at various different ages, where they are doing phenomenally sophisticated stuff using music technology, music production. And there's no reason why being able to decipher a waveform such as that isn't actually as equally important as being able to read staff notation, and actually building that into the kind of the curriculum at Key Stage 2 and 3 that leads into Key Stage 4 is pretty valuable. Likewise is that, which is obviously a screenshot of an editor from a digital audio workstation. I think that is Pro Tools, again taken from music production books. All the different things here. I would argue that when I was working with students, having them kind of drop samples in or drop sequenced elements in for a couple of bars here, it's a lot easier for them to see the structure and the texture going on. It isn't necessarily looking at, say, I don't know, Talus's Spemen Allium or a complicated fugue. Put a fugue in a digital audio workstation and you've got all sorts of, you can really see how the different parts come in and where you've got stretto, etc., etc. So it's not just for students that are accessing music because they're producing they're producing EDM, but it actually can have wider application as well. But of course, if you've got students that are wanting to focus on EDM and other styles that are appropriate for music technology, then actually this is arguably a more appropriate form of notation for them to become increasingly skilled at than the staff notation here. But actually learning both of those in parallel is obviously the dream. And then finally, you've got another screenshot there where you've got all the different automation, all the different production effects. And as you're looking at various things within the EdXL specs and the OCR specs, actually this is another very useful tool. And of course, the VQ pathways cover a range of different things, one of which is performance, one of which is composition and technology, one of which is business. And so you'll find that this is obviously an appropriate application of skill and appropriate knowledge about and knowledge of music that is appropriate to the particular part of the industry that you're focusing on with that student at that particular point. So in terms of what you intend to do with your curriculum, how you implement it, and the impact that it has, these are all things that are vital to consider, obviously, and the VQs kind of sit very nicely to help that as you're looking to engage all manner of students as a route alongside or as an alternative to GCSE. I'm now going to hand over to Patrick, which I think means I'm going to stop sharing, who is then going to talk to you in a bit more detail about RSL VQs. Thanks.
Right, I will now try and share my screen and hope that it works. Is that showing up for everybody?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, all working.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, firstly, just to introduce myself, I'm Patrick Healy and I'm Head of Business Development for our Vocational Qualifications at RSL. And thanks for your time this afternoon coming to listen to me and Dan. As Dan was saying, well, part of what Dan was saying was around the fact that, you know, we're not a board that says everybody should be doing our qualifications. We're a board that says everybody should be doing the right qualification for them. And I think this quote is quite instructive in terms of telling us why even schools with very successful programs delivering GCSE or A-level still come to us and are interested in delivering our qualifications alongside the GCSE or A-level program. So this comes from a very recent article that we did with music teachers, so music teachers September issue. And they wanted to do an article in the teacher's own words around increasing uptake and participation in music effectively in schools. And so we sourced 3 different teachers for them who, you know, without our interference, essentially put forward the reasons why they'd embraced our vocational curriculum alongside GCSE or as an alternative in some cases. So the school here in question, the Bewdley School, had a very successful GCSE program, but they realised that there were still plenty of people who were not accessing, music because for various reasons they weren't engaging with what the GCSE content was, or as Dan alluded to, perhaps they could have been excluded because they hadn't had previous experience with instrumental lessons, for example. So it's just quite an instructive quote about what can happen to schools that offer those 2 pathways and how you can actually build a much bigger cohort and a much more engagement in music in the school by offering both pathways. So just a bit of history about RSL and where we came from. So we were founded in 1991 and the real ethos there still exists in that we were founded to offer something different, not better, not worse, but different to what was available prior to that. So, you know, at that point, you really couldn't gain a contemporary music qualification. So in 1991, we were founded in order to offer students the ability to gain qualifications in contemporary music. And then I think there's a bit of a misconception that we've only just started offering vocational qualifications, but in fact, we started offering them in 2005. Firstly with music only qualifications. Subsequent to that, we've gone on to offer performing arts and most recently digital media. And now, well, this was last academic year, we've arrived at a point where We have over 20,000 students registered on our vocational qualifications, primarily in the UK, but in a few overseas markets as well, and over 500 delivery centres. It's likely that's going to be 600 delivery centres by the end of, well, by the end of the current approval window for this academic year. So in terms of just our brands, as I mentioned, we do offer music, but we do offer performing arts as well, and other subject areas. Crucial point is that we do offer qualifications that count in school and college league table measures, which means that it's really opened things up for secondary schools to consider what they're delivering, and also sixth form colleges, so that they can offer something that does actually work in their environment and is something that the management there will welcome, because it's all very well thinking, oh, the curriculum's excellent, but if it doesn't count in the league tables, a lot of the schools won't be able to run the qualifications. What am I doing here? Sorry about that. So just some key facts about the qualifications. As I mentioned, we'll be in 600 plus delivery centres for this academic year, 20,000 learners registered, qualification performance tables at levels 1 to 3, practical, flexible and genre neutral specifications. So that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to tell people that there's one type of music that's more important than another, one type of instrument that's important than another, and we're always looking to reflect specifically practical skills and knowledge. So that leads to the fact that we offer qualifications not just in performance, although that's a very popular pathway, but also in production, events and business in the musical sphere, especially at level 3. And in performing arts, we offer qualifications in acting, dance and musical theatre. At level 3, we've got UCAS points up to 168, which is equivalent to 3 very strong A-level grades. And they're also valid for Progress 8 and Attainment 8. So what do we feel, what do we think creative education should be about? So again, there's not one correct way of designing creative education in all spheres, but our priorities are on having practically focused qualifications so that learners should be assessed on the development and application of practical and technical skills. And so we try to remove or avoid having written exams, because that's not really what we're looking to assess. Some of the qualifications may be looking to assess with written exams, but that's not what we're looking to do. In terms of accessibility, this is another key for us. All learners should be able to submit evidence based on their own strengths. So the prerequisite is not that evidence is always submitted in written form. You know, there's probably lots of other ways to submit evidence, especially for practical qualifications. So we welcome blogs, vlogs, presentations, video discussions, interviews. We welcome centres being innovative in terms of, you know, what they're offering and the way that they're evidencing things. We also like flexibility in our qualifications, as up to as much as we're allowed effectively by government regulation of the qualification. So flexibility is very, very important to us. We try to offer a range of optional units wherever possible. And again, we obviously try to offer a range of different ways of delivering those units. But what it does do is that it means that we're not saying, okay, you're a performer, so you can't do any production, or you're interested in music business, so you can't do any songwriting. It's that sort of thing that allows centres to blend their courses and make the type of course that they need for their students and for their situation. And finally, in terms of the sort of core principles for design, we want things to be current. So we want to reflect industry trends. We want to reflect what's actually going on in the music industry. And that means, of course, that we are constantly redeveloping our units. And we always try and work with industry specialists to ensure that those units are up to date and actually reflect what's happening in the industry. So just to reaffirm, another key point, and this is sort of contrary to some other qualifications, our qualifications are genre neutral. So we don't believe one type of music is more important than another. What we're asking centres and teachers and students do is study the music that's important to them and to make the music that's important to them. We're not instrument specific. We don't value one instrument above another. And because we don't value one genre above another, we accommodate MCs and DJs alongside producers and instrumentalists. Everybody can get a qualification, doing what they love or doing what they're interested in. So in terms of what's on offer with music specifically, we have effectively two types of specification at levels 1, 2, and 3. We have the qualifications that are called music practitioners, and those are the ones that are delivered widely in secondary schools and sixth form colleges because they count on school and college league tables. They do tend to have more restricted content in terms of optional content, and they all contain external assessment. And then we have our creative music industry spec, which is newer and is all internally assessed. And you can see, obviously, in terms of the breadth of pathways on offer and thus the breadth of units on offer, it is wider because those qualifications are slightly less highly regulated in terms of what they're allowed to contain. So that's where you're going to find your entrepreneurship pathway, your live events pathway. Both are at the same level, both are legitimate qualifications. At level 3, both qualifications carry up to 168 UCAS points. So there's no differentiation in terms of something easy or not. They're just different, and they require different forms of assessment. And just, to reaffirm, our tech awards, so our level 1 and 2 qualifications, and our tech levels at level 3 are recognised and contribute to Department for Education performance measures. And to reiterate as well, all of our qualifications at level 3 carry UCAS points. So just about, we can go on and on about why our qualifications are industry relevant, but I think it's important that that's reflected in the sorts of places that deliver some of the qualifications that we offer. So we work with BIM in all of their UK colleges. They deliver our qualifications at level 3, so they have their own degree program there, but at level 3 all of their colleges will be offering our qualifications. Also, another key sort of provider in terms of well-known alumni, teachers, and obviously it's the BPI's own school, the Brick School, deliver our qualifications at level 2. So hundreds of students there doing music qualifications with us. And another long-running partner of ours, Access Creative College, have delivered our qualifications since the year dot, really, and have famous alumni have taken these qualifications, including Ed Sheeran and Jess Glynn. In terms of the question around where are our qualifications actually accepted, again, there seems to be sometimes people think, oh, well, that's not going to get you anywhere in terms of HE. This is just a sample of the types of places that accept our qualifications. It's much broader than this. But I think what you can see from these university logos is it's a real breadth of HE institutions that accept our qualifications, from the alternate providers like BIM and ACM, through to your specialist music colleges like Leeds College of Music and Birmingham Conservatoire. And then universities accept our qualifications as well, not just for music, for a breadth of degree programs there. So it really is it's really noticeable, especially in the last few years, the breadth of understanding of what we do, and the wider recognition of what we offer. In the past, many years ago, people would have said, oh, is that a BTEC, or what is that? I don't really understand what it is. But I think because of the number of students and the number of institutions offering our qualifications these days, it's much more widely recognized. And just to sort of give a picture of what the actual situation is, because I think there's a lot of reporting, rightly so, but there's a lot of reporting about sort of the death of music teaching in school, or that there's a sort of constant decline in numbers, and there are changes in numbers, and that's undoubtedly true. But we're quite often looking at the statistics, and actually, yes, there is a story about GCSE and A-level numbers dropping, but there's also another story about other qualifications numbers rising. So that we saw in 2020, and I think this will probably rise again, 43% of all music qualifications taken in schools and colleges were vocational. Yes, GCSE and A-level music has seen 16% drop in registration since 2015, but actually overall, there's 21% more people studying music qualifications in school and college than there were in the year 2000. And I think that fact's often lost. And just to reiterate, we're not saying don't do GCSE or A-level. Absolutely do GCSE or A-level, but there are lots of other students potentially in your institutions who will not do GCSE and A-level for various reasons, but would be interested in doing one of our qualifications. And those are the students that we feel would benefit potentially if more institutions looked at our qualification, or obviously there are other ones on the market as well. Hopefully you'll look at ours. So I hope that was of interest and that we might have generated some questions, but thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, guys. That was really fantastic. So I'm going to come out of focus mode now. And I'd like to ask everybody who's in the session, invite you to unmute yourselves, put your cameras on, and we'd now love to have your input and for Dan and Patrick to answer any of your questions. We have got a handful of people in the session at the moment. Just as they're thinking of their questions, and hopefully you can also put them in the chat as well. Dan and Patrick, maybe I could ask one first of all. And I think just in terms of a practical solution, how would you best recommend someone actually setting this up for the first time if they're running GCSEs already and are looking to run this concurrently?
Yeah, Patrick, do you want me to take that one? Because I was in a position in a previous life when I was actually assistant head and running the music college. I was looking at basically expanding and generating growth within the music college and not more opportunities for students to study. So we had a GCSE pathway that was there, and it progressed through to A-level. We also had an A-level music technology offer, which is really good. So I was looking for something that was going to help create, generate progression route from Key Stage 3 all the way through to Key Stage 5. So essentially, we registered to deliver a music practitioner's pathway, but using the composition and technology side of things, and essentially placed that in an option block. And then as an alternative additional offer, and then the interest that was generated meant that it doubled the number of students that wanted to engage with the course at Key Stage 4. So that ended up being on the timetable, and as a result of that, there needs to be more teaching. So, part-time teacher turned into a full-time teacher, and then that meant that there was more capacity to do other stuff around, extracurricular as well. And that sort of the curriculum growth fed the extracurricular growth as well because of the opportunities. And as it happened, we were able to, put in place additional extracurricular activities that were going to be beneficial for the students on the vocational pathway as well. And actually, there were lots of students that were engaged in huge numbers of things outside school that the curriculum hadn't necessarily catered for, and they were producing stuff that was really, really high end. And the vocational pathway was the more appropriate route for them, because that was the one that was that kind of took the skills that were at the particular level and then sort of expanded it further. And I think the other thing that we were very careful to try and do was to make sure that the curriculum at Key Stage 3 kind of nurtured those particular skills as well, so that it went through. And it wasn't that the students on the VQ course and the students on the GCSE course learned completely different things. They learned similar sorts of things. It was just approached in a different way, so that so they end up progressing. And I think we did end up with. We did end up in a position where new students who had gone through the vocational pathway through composition technology were able to access the A-level music technology course. So that worked quite nicely. There are institutions in the UK. There's certainly one I could think of on the south coast. Patrick will correct me if I'm wrong. That has actually set things up so that he's got GCSE and VQ running at the same time on the same timetable.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those.
Organising stuff.
Yeah, there's quite a few of those, but I think what you'll find is actually what Dan's describing there. If you are in the position of being able to offer the qualifications to distinct groups, what we've seen, and we've got a number of case studies that we can supply, is that actually music becomes a more important thing in the school purely because of the number of students that are engaging in it. And yeah, without being cynical, it's not surprising that if lots of people are doing the subject, it becomes quite important to the management that subject succeeds, and the very nature of the growth means that there is a greater focus on it and perhaps more interest in it from senior management than there may have been previously. So it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, often that you add more students, you give them access to a subject, the subject becomes more important, and then it snowballs. So yeah, where you're able to do that, it's something that can really benefit the subject as a whole in the school, not just at those for those age groups.
And likewise, if you happen to be in a position where you're running GCSE and VQ at the same time, when you've got composition focused lessons or practical creative lessons, they can actually be working on pretty similar projects and working in a similar sort of way. They're just following a different assignment brief essentially and heading towards a slightly different assessment methodology, but practically and operationally they're actually essentially doing very similar things, very similar tasks.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. And if anybody else has any questions, please let us know now. If there are no further questions, then, we have one coming here from Margaret. It says, thank you, Patrick and Dan, for a great presentation. Thanks for that, Margaret. We appreciate that. So wishing everyone a great afternoon. Thanks so much for joining. All of our sessions will be made available on the MTA website, and with a huge thanks to Patrick and Dan for joining the MTA's first session of this autumn term. Please do check out the website for all of our future dates, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.